right, everyone, happy Monday. It's shaping up to be a huge day of news. It is 4 o'clock in New York. It's also shaping up to be a very bad day for Donald Trump and his so-called hoaxes. Breaking in the last hour, Democrats on the House Oversight Committee have released what appears to be the image that Donald Trump claimed never existed over and over and over again, to the point that Donald Trump has even sued the news outlet that first reported on the existence of this image. We're talking, of course, about the note Donald Trump allegedly wrote to his pal Jeffrey Epstein for his 50th birthday. Here it is. It reads, quote, voiceover. There must be more to life than having everything, the note begins. Donald, yes, there is, but I won't tell you what it is. Jeffrey, nor will I, since I also know what it is. Donald, we have certain things in common, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, yes. Yes, we do, come to think of it. Donald Trump, enigmas never age. Have you noticed that? Jeffrey, as a matter of fact, it was clear to me the last time I saw you. Donald, a pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret, end quote. Wow. Let all that sink in. It's only Monday. In a post online, Donald Trump's Deputy Chief of Staff, Taylor Budowich, claims that the letter doesn't contain Trump's signature. It was first published by the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal is the defendant in a defamation suit brought by Donald Trump, in which Donald Trump claims this letter is, quote, non-existent. We can also expect more revelations in the coming days. A bipartisan group of lawyers on the House Oversight Committee are expected to see a series of unredacted documents as well. They include flight logs and phone records, as well as an unredacted version of this birthday book. It's all happening this week, and it's all happening at the same time as a so far unfounded claim that someone made who was trying to defend Donald Trump is collapsing in spectacular and humiliating fashion, if that's still possible for a Republican. Last week, Speaker Mike Johnson, one of the most powerful Republicans in Washington, made an audacious claim. He said that Donald Trump cares so deeply about the women who were abused and harmed by Jeffrey Epstein that Donald Trump was, wait for it, and sit down if you're not, was actually an FBI informant. And then Speaker Johnson said this to, quote, try to take this stuff down, end quote. He said that. Republican Thomas Massie, who's leading a bipartisan push to release all the Epstein files alongside his colleague, a Democrat, Congressman Ro Khanna, had this to say about Republican Speaker Mike Johnson's comment.
The lawyers for the victims said that Donald Trump had been helpful in 2009 in their case by giving them information, but being an informant implies some formal connection and ongoing relationship with the FBI. I don't know what that's all about. I think the speaker needs to clarify that. And if it's a hoax, why was Donald Trump an informant to a hoax?
Yeah, why? So, again, these are all Republicans. This is Republican Thomas Massie with the $64 million question, why was he an informant to a hoax? So Mike Johnson, getting caught with his sycophant hat on, did go ahead and clean it up. He backed off his claim that Donald Trump was an informant in the Epstein investigation. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, told reporters this today, quote, oh, I don't know if I used the right word. Speaker of the House, guys. I said FBI informant. I'm not sure. I wasn't there. This isn't my lane. I'm just repeating what is common knowledge and what has been out in the public for a long time, end quote. Speaker of the House. It's unclear to what degree, if at all, Donald Trump helped prosecutors go after Epstein. And if the speaker wanted transparency on that matter, on that question, he's the speaker. He could bring a bill to the floor to release all the Epstein files. But he hasn't done that. He refuses to do that, actually. The implosion of Donald Trump's disinformation efforts when it comes to his ties to Jeffrey Epstein is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Joining us here at the table, President of Reproductive Freedom for All, Mini Timuraju, is here Also joining us, the host of the Fast Politics podcast and Vanity Fair special correspondent, MSNBC political analyst Molly Jong-Fast is here. And with us at the table, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin joins us. Tell me about what is jarring to the eye. I have to say, this photo of Donald Trump's letter to Jeffrey Epstein in the bound birthday book is on the homepage of the Wall Street Journal. There it is. It's, I don't know what the words are. It's bawdy, it's gross. That Trump wrote it to a dead sex offender is really, really sick. What is the significance of this day?
There are a bunch. I mean, Nicolle, where do you want me to start? There's so much significance to this day. But let's start with the fact that Donald Trump kept calling the Epstein matter a hoax, and not coincidentally, that started for him very soon after he was confronted by the Wall Street Journal on around July 15th with the fact that they had a copy of this letter. Now, the letter, as you just showed it, is basically exactly as described by the Journal, and yet there's something, as you just noted, totally jarring about seeing it in person for the first time. There was a point in time earlier where you were scrolling down it, and it felt like we were scanning down a female body. There's just a feeling of creepiness that accompanies it that even the reporting about it didn't convey.
Well, and let me just say, it's not a feeling. It is a female body, and the signature is obviously in a place that enhances the creepy feeling. I mean, we're dealing in a world where what is.
Yes.
And I was just told there's a statement from Brad Edwards, who's represented 200 survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's sexual abuse, on the release of this image today. Let me read this quote. President Trump's hypocrisy has been most frustrating for the victims. He told the public the Epstein story should, quote, go away, yet filed a $10 billion lawsuit that only magnifies the very issue he wants silenced. With today's release, the least he could do is withdraw that lawsuit and publicly apologize to the journalist he attacked for reporting what seems to have now been proved to be true. What happens to, this is coming from the victim's attorney, so I'll get right to this. What happens to the defamation suit?
Well, I think Trump, as we know, is not likely to back down. But I think this becomes increasingly difficult for him because not only do we have an electronic copy of the letter now that is exactly as reported by the Journal, which makes it difficult to show that they acted, as a defamation suit requires, with reckless disregard for the truth. If anything, this proves it was true. But that will become even more difficult later this week when House Oversight staff goes to see original versions of this book in its unredacted form. That will show them a bound book in which this letter is part. You and I both know that the idea of inserting a fake letter into a 22-year-old book is somewhat preposterous. It's not as if the Epstein estate had motivation or reason to do that. They don't really have a dog in this fight. And so it will just make it all the more difficult for him to continue along those lines. But Nicolle, I want to say one more thing about the significance of this day. It's not lost on me that we're finding out that this letter was in fact exactly as the Journal reported on the same day that Donald Trump's liability to E. Jean Carroll in the amount of $83.3 million was upheld by the Second Circuit. This is a person who has told us repeatedly before not to believe survivors and who has made a repeated judgment in this case not to enhance their credibility by making the decision that seems obvious to all of us. Release more of the files, authorize the Department of Justice to be transparent with the American people. This isn't a person who's aligning himself with survivors. If anything, this is a person whose conduct again and again has shown us that he has been himself a perpetrator, not a person who sides with victims and survivors.
I want to keep this conversation centered on the victims, but I just want to do one more thing on the fact that there's a defamation lawsuit for $10 billion that has been claimed. I went to journalism school and learned that truth is an absolute defense. And the truth is this thing is now before all of our eyes. I keep coming back to Donald Trump telling his supporters from a podium, don't believe your eyes, don't believe your ears. The White House sort of disinformation today includes an argument about his signature, but let me put up the signature side by side with the signature. I mean, again, I'm not a forensic signature analyst, but this is the defense. Let me read the rest of the smears that the Wall Street Journal has endured from not just the president, but the vice president and the president's spokesperson. Here's what J.D. Vance said about the Wall Street Journal. Quote, "Forgive my language, but this story is complete and utter bullshit. The Wall Street Journal should be ashamed for publishing it. Where is this letter? Where is this letter? Would you be shocked to learn they never showed it to us before publishing it? Does anyone honestly believe this sounds like Donald Trump?" J.D. Vance wasn't done. Quote, "Doesn't it violate some rule of journalistic ethics to publish a letter like this without showing it to the victim of the hit piece? Will the people who have brought into every hoax against President Trump show an ounce of skepticism before buying into this bizarre story?" Caroline Leavitt posted this about the Wall Street Journal. Quote, "The Wall Street Journal published a hatchet job article with a fake birthday letter that's supposedly from '03. Caroline Leavitt went on to say, "This is like the Steele dossier that kick-started the Russia hoax all over again. The Wall Street Journal refused to show us the letter and conceded they don't even have it in their possession when we asked them to verify the alleged document they're basing their entire fake story on." She went on and on. I'm not going to subject my viewers to all of her lies, but what happens to all the lies that have been put out there on behalf of Caroline and J.D. Vance about the Wall Street Journal?
Well, and I think it's important to point out that the Wall Street Journal is owned by famous liberal Rupert Murdoch, right?
Like, as I'm asking the question, I'm like, why do I bleeping care?
Right.
But it's still, it's a news organization, and these are journalists.
Yes, and is a man who really understands what it's like to go to court on a lawsuit and win, especially when it comes to journalism. I mean, he's also had other problems, but the point here is that I think that what's so important about this moment is this is a man who ran Donald Trump in the first term. He was always making homages to QAnon, right? Remember QAnon? Was an idea that someone was trafficking children.
Right.
Now here's a man who actually we know trafficked children.
Right.
So and the fact that this administration was constantly like, we have it on our desk, Pam Bondi, it's on my desk, the list is on my desk, and then all of a sudden it's fake news, it's not real, it's a hoax. Honestly, they told their base that this matters. And we all know morally that this matters, that the people who traffic children are the lowest of the low. They are the people who deserve, to be called out, all of it, to be jailed. And so I think to pivot at the last minute because you're worried, who knows, or because you feel whatever, that's not okay. And I think that the base feels rightfully the way the rest of us do, which is, like, you can't pivot on this.
Well, and the base includes some of the victims. I mean, here are the victims in their own words talking about their own politics. This is Haley Robson.
You invited the president to meet with you. Have you heard anything from the White House?
Crickets. I've heard crickets. Donald Trump, we are not here to point fingers. We are not here to be hostile. We, in fact, would like to team up with Congress and team up with this administration to not only come to a resolution for the Epstein files, but also we have lives to live. And, it doesn't help us when for years we have been ignored, disregarded, and the fact that we came to the Capitol uninvited and, we're not getting paid for this. There's no compensation. We want justice. And for us to travel all the way and to just be once again disregarded and called a hoax, it's defamatory, but beyond that, it's extremely offensive to our trauma. As somebody who voted for this administration and for somebody who rode the coattail of the whole campaign being based on, hey, listen, we are going to resolve this by formally releasing all of the documentation that's been withheld, and we want answers too. My party didn't show up for me. My party was a very big disappointment for me.
I'm sorry to make you follow her, but because she's so compelling, and the idea that there are no Democratic or Republican angles on this story. There are victims who were promised something by Donald Trump.
What she said is what we've heard from so many Republican and independent women who voted for Trump despite a lot of our efforts to persuade them not to, right? They voted for Trump because they felt connected to his message. They felt he was tell it like it is, tell the truth. And they are profoundly disturbed and disappointed by what they're hearing now, these victims particularly, but also what they're seeing overall from this administration, which is promise after promise broken, almost like a bait and switch situation. But I think what's most important about what she said is that she wanted to work with Congress. She wants to work with the Trump administration. It's notable that the organizations behind bringing those survivors to the Capitol, they're not partisan organizations. These are survivors organizations. These are groups that focus on sexual assault. These are not political organizations. And these women were there just to speak their truth and to hold people in power accountable. And they're not getting that. And that is incredibly painful to watch.
Let me play the ad that your group has up.
Trump's enablers are protecting him from the consequences of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein because it's all one plan. Question women's right to vote, rewind advances in women's health care, chip away at our reproductive freedom, and silence the survivors of sexual assault. Trump's enablers could make him release the files, let the world see the truth, but they aren't. Tell the Department of Justice to release the Epstein files. We need to fight for survivors and demand the truth.
It brings us to Speaker Johnson, who months ago I described on the air as the White House Director of Legislative Affairs. I worked in the White House. It's an insult to every past White House Director of Leg Affairs. To go on TV and lie and say Donald Trump was an FBI informant in sort of the powder keg that is the right-wing view on FBI informants when it came to January 6th and other issues was one of the most toxic things I've heard from a toxic political movement in the MAGA Republicans. And to say something so offensive to Republican Thomas Massie, that Massie went on TV and he had to apologize and take it all back, does represent a new low from these Republicans.
You know, the reason we cut the ad and the reason why we've been more vocal on this issue is because it is all connected. Mike Johnson is a longtime extremist who is anti-gender equity. And there is a through line from Epstein to now, to this Congress, to this White House, that is determined to roll back fundamental freedoms for the majority of Americans, but let's be clear, a special emphasis on women. And look, it's not an accident. You know, in all authoritarian regimes, in the beginning of an assault on democracy, they go after the women first and their reproductive freedoms. And it's not an accident that we're also seeing this pro-natalist movement grow at the same time. They want to put these survivors in their place. They want them to shut up. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm really proud of the Republican women who have stood up. I never thought I'd agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene, but if they come up with that list and she reads it from the House floor, it is going to be the beginning of a massive crack in their coalition that we, frankly, I am partisan, and we as advocates have to exploit to tell the truth to voters.
Do you want to stick around a little bit longer? I know we're supposed to free you. If you can stick around a little bit longer, there's much more to the story. We're going to follow the money. There's a